I gave up dancing, dreaming, and pieces of myself, until silence became louder than love. My name is Sophia. I'm 27, and I used to believe that love meant staying, even when it hurt, even when the silence between us became louder than any argument could ever be. I thought love was about endurance, about holding on, about being the one who never lets go, no matter how heavy the weight becomes. I thought that if I was quiet enough, patient enough, soft enough, eventually he would see me again. At first the silence was tender. It felt like comfort, like familiarity. You know, those quiet Sunday mornings when no one speaks, but the air feels full of presence. We had that once. I held on to that memory like a thread in a burning house. But over time, that silence stopped being peace and started becoming distance. A distance I couldn't cross, no matter how hard I reached. He stopped asking how I was. I stopped telling him, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know if he'd hear me. The silence didn't just sit between us. It grew teeth, sharp ones. It bit into my joy, tore into my confidence. It fed on all the little things I used to love about myself. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, brushing my hair, and realizing I hadn't laughed in days. Not a real laugh. Not the kind that comes from being seen and loved. My laughter had become polite, controlled, the kind you use in conversations where you're pretending to be okay so no one asks questions. Pretending became a habit. I told my friends we were doing fine, that we were just in a season. I smiled through dinners, made excuses when he didn't show up, and forced myself to believe that if I just loved him a little harder, things would turn around. I thought that was what strong women did. They stayed, they gave more, they held the roof up even when it was falling. But the thing is, no one tells you what pretending costs. No one prepares you for the quiet ache that settles in your bones when you lie next to someone who doesn't even turn towards you anymore. You don't realize how lonely it feels to be in the same room with someone and still feel invisible. You start to question everything about yourself. Was I too much? Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? I replayed every moment in my head like a film stuck on repeat, trying to find the frame where we lost each other. But there wasn't one. It wasn't a moment. It was a slow fade. The kind you don't notice until you're standing at the edge of yourself, wondering when you became this woman, quiet, small, and aching for something she can't even name anymore. He would come home and walk right past me, eyes on his phone, keys on the counter. No kiss, no smile, just a presence that felt like absence. I started cooking less, talking less, feeling less. It was like living in a house where everything looked the same, but the soul had quietly slipped out the back door. I bled a little every day, not in ways anyone could see, but inside I was unraveling, losing color. My world used to feel wide, full of hope and plans. Now it was just shadows of what we used to be. I missed the way he used to look at me, like I was magic. I missed feeling chosen, desired, heard. One night, I sat on the bathroom floor after he'd gone to bed. I didn't cry. I just stared at the wall and listened to the silence pressing in on me. I realized then I had become a stranger in my own life, a woman who smiled in public and broke in private, a woman who thought staying was noble, even when it meant dying by inches. And in that moment, I whispered something out loud I had never dared to say before. I'm not okay. It was the truest thing I'd said in months, and somehow, hearing my own voice filled the room more than all the silence ever did. I gave up dancing first. It seemed like such a small thing at the time. Just a quiet surrender, a soft letting go. I told myself I was just tired, that maybe I'd dance again next weekend or the one after that. But weekends turned into months, and soon the music that used to live in my body fell silent. The shoes stayed buried in the back of my closet, untouched, collecting dust like so many other forgotten pieces of myself. He never noticed when I stopped. Not once did he ask why the music wasn't playing anymore. Not once did he look at me and wonder where the sparkle in my eyes had gone. And maybe that was when it started. This slow, gentle unraveling. I didn't even fight it. I just began to shrink, piece by piece, until I fit the mold of what I thought he wanted. At first, I convinced myself that love meant bending, that compromise was the currency of connection. I thought sacrifice was proof of devotion. So I gave up my dreams next, not all at once. It was more like one small decision at a time. I passed on opportunities, said no to invitations, stayed silent when I wanted more. I dimmed myself down to keep things steady, to keep peace, to keep him. I stopped bringing up the things I used to dream about. The little bakery I wanted to open one day. The trip to Florence I always said I'd take before I turned 30. The poems I used to write at midnight. I locked those pieces of myself in a box marked maybe later, and then buried that box deep inside, where even I stopped looking for it. Because what good were dreams if they only made me feel further away from the person lying next to me? I thought sacrifice was love. I really did. I believed that giving him everything meant we would last, that if I could just pour more of myself into this relationship, he'd start to meet me halfway. But instead, I just kept pouring and pouring until there was nothing left. I ran dry, and he never even noticed. There was a night, I remember it so vividly. He was watching something on his phone, completely lost in it. I was sitting across from him at the dinner table, barely touching my food. The house was quiet except for the occasional clink of a fork against porcelain. And I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt this wave of sadness I couldn't name. I realized I could disappear in that moment, and he probably wouldn't notice until the bed was cold. It hit me then, how far I had wandered from myself. I used to laugh so easily, from my belly, from my soul. I used to dance in the kitchen barefoot, twirling with the music, letting joy spill out of me like sunlight. I used to be fire, but somewhere along the way, I traded fire for silence, passion for survival. And it's not that he ever asked me to give those things up. That's the cruel part. He didn't have to. I just kept offering pieces of myself on the altar of us, thinking that if I gave enough, loved enough, surrendered enough, it would be enough. But it never was. He took what I gave without ever reaching back for my hand, without ever saying, "Keep that part of you. It's beautiful. Don't lose it for me." So I lost it. I lost the sound of my own laughter. I didn't even realize how quiet my world had become until one day someone made a joke, just a simple, harmless joke, and everyone laughed, everyone but me. I smiled, but the laugh didn't come. I remember standing there, frozen in that moment, realizing I couldn't even summon the sound anymore. It was like it had been erased from me, rewritten. That night, I laid in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling, and I whispered to myself, "Where did I go?" And the silence answered back. The mirror used to be my favorite place. I would stand in front of it, brush in hand, humming to myself as I got ready for the day. I used to love the way I looked when I was happy, like my face was lit from the inside, but at some point the reflection stopped feeling familiar. I'd stare at myself and think, "She looks tired." Then it became, "She looks lost." And eventually, I couldn't even meet my own eyes. The girl looking back at me wasn't someone I recognized anymore. She wore my face, but it was hollowed out, dulled, almost blurred around the edges like she was slowly fading away. I started waking up already exhausted, like even sleep couldn't refill me. I'd force a smile in the mirror, try to lift my cheeks just enough to look alive. But it felt like wearing a mask that didn't fit, and every time I left the house, I slipped into that mask like it was part of getting dressed. Makeup, keys, wallet, smile, the rehearsed kind, the kind that says everything's good, even when everything inside is unraveling. I got so good at pretending. My friends would ask, "How are you two doing?" And I had it down to an art. This little laugh, a quick shrug, something vague like, "You know, every relationship has its ups and downs." I watched their eyes scan mine, looking for cracks, but I was careful. I didn't let them see the grief I was swallowing every day, the heartbreak of being invisible in your own life. Inside, my heart was screaming for help. But it's hard to explain the kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises. The kind where your partner still shows up physically, but emotionally they're already gone. He was there. He was always there, sitting on the couch, sleeping in the bed, eating the food I cooked, breathing the same air. But it felt like I lived alone, like I was in a house filled with echoes instead of conversation. I remember the night I broke down in the shower. That tiny space became the only place where I could be real, where I could let the tears fall without fear of being heard or judged. I sat on the floor, water pouring over me, and I whispered, "Please, please come back." But I wasn't even sure who I was asking. Him, myself, the woman I used to be. I just wanted to feel something again, something more than this constant, aching numbness. What hurt the most was that I couldn't remember the last time I felt loved. Not appreciated, not thanked, loved deeply, fully, the kind of love that wraps around you like a blanket and whispers, "You're safe here." I had replaced that with checklist conversations, short answers, and glances that barely lingered. And every time I told myself to hold on, to keep going, a little more of me slipped away. There were days I'd dress up, do my makeup, and stand in front of him just a little longer, hoping he'd look up from his phone, notice something, say anything. "You look beautiful," or even just, "You okay?" But the silence always answered for him, so I turned those longings into stories I told myself. I'd convince myself he was tired, that he had too much on his mind, that he loved me, just not in the way I needed. I began to feel ashamed for wanting more, for needing to be seen, for missing things like affection, laughter, connection. I called myself dramatic, sensitive, ungrateful, until eventually I stopped asking for anything at all. I told myself, "It's fine." And then I repeated it so many times that it became a part of me. I said it at dinners, at gatherings, even to my own reflection. "I'm fine." And maybe if I said it enough, it would become true. But my heart knew better. Deep down, it cried for someone to notice, to ask, to care, to reach for me in the darkness I'd been living in. And every time no one did, the silence carved a deeper hole inside me. I didn't know how to scream anymore. I didn't even know how to speak about it. So I smiled, I played the part, I showed up, and inside I waited for someone, anyone, to see that behind every "I'm fine." I was begging not to disappear completely, and slowly I was. Every birthday became quieter, not because people forgot, not because there weren't gifts or messages, but because the one person I wanted to be seen by didn't look up. He'd remember, of course. There would be a dinner reservation, maybe a card with a pre-written message, a smile stretched just enough to pass as sincere. But the kind of remembering that truly matters, the kind that notices what makes your soul light up, was always missing. And I began to feel like just another task on his to-do list. I used to wake up on my birthday feeling like the world might pause for a moment just for me. That maybe, for one day, someone might hold me close and say, "I'm glad you're here." Not because they had to, but because they meant it. But instead, I started waking up with a quiet ache, already bracing myself for the pretending. For the fake laugh when he handed me something I didn't need. For the silence between us when I blew out candles and wished for something I couldn't name. It wasn't about the gifts. It was never about that. It was about feeling known. Feeling like someone saw the girl behind the smile. The one who still lit up at handwritten notes. Who cried at unexpected kindness. Who longed for arms to fall into at the end of a long day. I didn't want jewelry or flowers. I just wanted to be seen, remembered, held in a way that said, "I know you." And every year, when that didn't come, I found myself standing alone outside after the celebrations ended, watching the sky change colors. The sunset became my confessional. I'd whisper the same wish into the wind, barely audible but desperate. "Please, someone see me, please, let me matter again." I didn't even know who I was asking. Maybe God, maybe the stars, maybe just the wind itself. Anything that would listen without judgment. Anything that could hear what I couldn't say out loud anymore. Because by then, I had stopped talking about what I needed. I had learned that vulnerability in our house was met with discomfort, awkward silences, sometimes defensiveness. So I kept it all inside, the longing, the sadness, the quiet mourning for the woman I used to be. The one who used to dream, used to dance, used to believe that love could be soft and loud at the same time. I missed that version of me. The one who would run into the ocean without overthinking it. Who believed people meant what they said. Who wrote love letters and meant every word. I used to be full of light, but the years began to dim me, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to bring her back. Every little milestone became a reminder of what I wasn't saying. Anniversaries, holidays, even casual Friday nights. I'd sit across from him, watching him scroll through his phone, and wonder if he even saw me anymore. If he noticed that I had been shrinking for months. If he could still find traces of the girl he fell in love with, or if he had stopped looking entirely. And still, I whispered, every sunset, every birthday. I whispered what my heart couldn't carry in silence anymore. Not full sentences, just fragments, hopes, little scraps of longing sent out into the world like messages in a bottle. Maybe someone, somewhere, would catch them. Maybe someone would hear. I stopped expecting the answer to come from him. That was the hardest part to accept. Realizing that the man I shared my life with had stopped being the place where my heart could rest. Realizing that the softest parts of me were no longer safe in his hands. So I offered them to the sky instead, to the wind, to the moments that made me feel small enough to believe I could disappear and no one would notice, but sacred enough to still try and be heard. Because I wasn't asking for the impossible. I wasn't asking to be adored every second. I was asking for presence, for attention, for a moment of being held without having to beg for it, for someone to look at me, not through me, and say, "I see you." But the wind doesn't answer. It just carries the words, far away, quietly, and all I can do is hope that somewhere, somehow, they land in a place where they finally mean something. I didn't want grand gestures. I didn't want roses or apologies that came too late. I just wanted to be held in the way that says, "I see you, I hear you, I feel what you feel even if I don't have the words." That kind of holding has nothing to do with arms. It's the kind that lives in silence, in eye contact, in the way someone chooses to stay close even when your heart is heavy and your words are hard to find. That's what I wanted. Not physical comfort, but emotional refuge. The kind of understanding that feels like a shelter when everything inside you is unraveling. but I stopped expecting that kind of holding from him. I learned, slowly and painfully, that he didn't know how to hold what he didn't understand. And instead of trying, he just distanced. I could see it in the way he shifted when I cried, the way he changed the subject when my voice got shaky, the way he'd leave the room if things got too quiet between us, as if silence itself made him uncomfortable, even when silence was the only way I knew how to ask for help. I remember sitting on the couch one night, tears threatening to spill as I stared at the floor. I didn't even know what had triggered it that time. Maybe it was the buildup of too many things I hadn't said. Maybe it was just the loneliness pressing too hard on my chest. He walked in, looked at me, then picked up the remote and asked what I wanted to watch. I wanted to scream, "Don't you see me? Don't you feel this weight in the room?" But I just shook my head and said, "Whatever you want." Because asking to be understood had started to feel like a burden I didn't want to place on him anymore. So I began holding myself, not in strength, but in survival. I wrapped myself in silence, in distraction, in pretending. I became my own comfort, my own listener, my own home. And as strange as it sounds, it's possible to feel completely alone while lying next to someone, to ache for connection in the same room where someone sleeps peacefully beside you, to reach out with your heart over and over and feel nothing reaching back. That kind of loneliness is hard to explain, because it doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unseen, from having your pain minimized, from watching someone tune out every time you open your mouth. It's the kind of loneliness you never chose, but somehow ended up carrying every day like a second skin. You learn to live with it. You learn to smile through it. You even start to forget what it felt like to be truly understood, because it's been so long since anyone tried. I used to think I was asking for too much. I would replay our conversations over and over in my head, wondering if I'd been too emotional, too sensitive, anything. I would blame myself for needing more than he was willing to give. And each time I told myself to shrink, to adjust, to settle, another piece of me disappeared. I remember once sitting across from him at dinner, trying to explain why I'd been so quiet. I told him I felt like I was carrying so much alone, that I didn't feel heard anymore. He just stared at me for a second and said, "You're overthinking again." That was it. No follow-up, no attempt to dig deeper, just those 4 words that made everything in me shut down, and in that moment I realized he didn't want to understand me. He just wanted things to stay easy. So I stopped trying. I started keeping things to myself, not because I didn't need support, but because I knew I wouldn't find it in him. I cried in the shower where no one could hear. I journaled things I used to say out loud. I smiled at parties, nodded at check-ins, said I'm okay, when I was anything but, and the worst part, I started to believe it was normal, that this was what love turned into, that this was just life. But somewhere deep down, I knew that love shouldn't feel like a weight, that real connection doesn't require translation, that being held, with presence, with patience, with empathy, is not too much to ask. It's the bare minimum of what a heart deserves. And until that kind of holding finds me again, I'll keep carrying myself the best I can, even if it means wrapping myself in a loneliness I never asked for. Regret doesn't come all at once. It doesn't arrive with loud footsteps or slam the door on its way in. It creeps in quietly, barefoot, soft, familiar. You don't even realize it's there until it's already settled beside you in the dark, whispering memories you didn't ask to relive. It echoes in the everyday moments, the ones that used to feel like nothing. The clink of a mug in the kitchen, the sound of footsteps fading down the hallway, the way the refrigerator hums when the room is too quiet. I used to think regret would feel like a storm, but it's not. It's the absence of a voice, the silence after the music stops, I feel it most in the mornings. When I wake up and the light falls across the bed in just the right way, and I remember how different that light used to feel when there was laughter in the house. I'd make coffee and wait for him to join me. But now, even when he's there, it feels like I'm alone. He sits with his phone. I stir my drink. We speak in fragments, in tired routines. And still, I search his face for something, anything, that might make the silence feel less permanent. There's this one memory that keeps coming back. We were standing in the kitchen years ago, and I was laughing, truly laughing, at something ridiculous. He came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and kissed the back of my neck. I didn't even have to ask. He just felt me. Back then, I believed that was enough. That kind of love could carry us through anything. But somewhere along the way, that version of us vanished. The laughter grew quiet. The touches became rare, and now when I stand in that same kitchen, all I feel is the space between us. The door closes when he leaves for work, and I just stare at it. Not because I'm sad he's gone, but because I'm not sure I feel anything anymore. That scares me more than sadness ever could. I used to cry when things felt distant. Now I just go through the motions. I clean, I scroll, I smile when someone texts, I answer, I'm doing okay. But the truth is, I don't know what okay feels like anymore. It's not that we had one big fight, or one final betrayal. That might have been easier to walk away from. It's the slow unraveling that breaks you. The way two people can share a home, a bed, a life, and still become strangers. It's the way you stop talking about dreams because they never get met with interest. The way you stop arguing because silence is less exhausting. The way you stop reaching for someone who stopped reaching back long ago. And yet I stayed for longer than I should have. I stayed because I believed love was about holding on, even when it hurt. I stayed because I didn't want to be the one who gave up. I stayed because I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd turn around and see me again. But he never did, and that's what regret sounds like now. Not screaming, just echoing, in the way I tuck myself into bed, in the way I flinch when he brushes past me without a word, in the way I lie awake at night and wonder, what would it feel like to be wanted again? I don't think he ever meant to make me feel invisible. I don't think he even notices how far I've drifted from the girl I used to be. But that's the thing about regret. It doesn't need a villain. It just needs time and silence and 1,000 missed chances that could have been taken but weren't. Sometimes I wonder what he would do if he woke up one morning and I was gone. If the space I occupied finally became too empty to ignore. If he'd walk into the kitchen, find the coffee made but no one there, and realize what he'd lost. Or if he'd just carry on, unchanged, because maybe I was already gone long before I ever walked out the door. And I guess that's the hardest part, knowing I disappeared in the same house I once built my world inside. Knowing that the love I gave so freely now lives in the quiet, in the shadows, in the echoes of what we could have been. Regret doesn't shout, it lingers. I didn't leave all at once. I left in pieces, in the silences you didn't notice, in the tears I cried alone, in the dreams I buried just to keep peace. I tried, God. I tried to make this feel like home again, to make myself enough, even when I was empty. But I can't keep folding myself into shapes that don't fit. I can't keep whispering my needs into rooms that never echo back. I don't hate you. That's the part that hurts the most. I just finally realized you were never going to hold me in the way I needed. Not with your arms, but with your heart. And I deserve to be felt, to be known, to be chosen, without having to beg. So this is my goodbye. Not with anger, not with blame, just with the quiet truth that I can't stay where I'm slowly disappearing. You'll wake up and the coffee will still be warm, but I won't be there, and maybe then you'll hear the silence I've been screaming in all along. Goodbye.